Thank you, Paula. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the next speaker. When I was asked to introduce David, I thought, well, that's interesting. It'd be quite nice to introduce someone that I actually know. For those of you, those observant among you, you probably can't read my name, but one of the many similarities I have with David is I share the same surname. David is my father. He's a Sloan alumni. So David actually graduated in 1985, and from LBS I graduated 2015. So 30 years apart. David, similar to me in some respects, but David left school at 15 to take an apprenticeship with the Royal Navy. Became a ship designer, won a scholarship from the Royal Navy to go to university to further his education in ship design. He then kind of moved around the world, including working in Washington DC, and then was lucky enough to be to I guess win the scholarship from the Royal Navy to come up to London Business School and do the Sloan program. 2010, David started his own company. I'd followed his career, which had changed from Royal Navy to, as you'll see from the presentation, the amusement industry, probably about 20 years ago. I'd followed David's career very closely. I'm an engineer by background. And just about 2012, 2013, we were having a discussion and talking about the opportunities for me in the company, and there was a job offer that came with a catch, and the catch was, and if I just find it and quote from David, if he joined, says David, I wanted him to do a business degree. So the catch was I had to come to LBS and do the Sloan program. So yeah, thank you, David. I've now joined the company, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome David Vatcher, Sloan 17, to come and present Crossing the Chasm.
Always rely on Matthew to do the technology bit. So, leaving the Royal Navy, or the Royal Corps of Naval Constructors, as a ship designer, what was I doing? Developing things that went up and down made some people sick, so I looked for something similar to do. And came across roller coasters, and I thought that would be pretty good. So in 1997, because of some technology I've been working on in linear motors, a roller coaster company approached me and said, how about taking that technology and launching a 14-ton roller coaster to 60 miles an hour in 2.8 seconds? Do you think you can do that? I said, I don't know. There are two technologies. We did a big evaluation. The technology that had the best advantage, a third of the power, a ninth of the heating, had never been done properly. And there was a, quote, random failure. There is no such thing as a random failure. We have to find it. And I put together a team. We signed a contract with Disney before we had the solution. I had a backup solution in case it didn't work. 3 months later, just before Christmas, my team walked into the office. They didn't have to tell me anything. They knew the problem. And it was, once we understood it, it took another 3 months to actually come up with a solution. 3 months later, as soon as they came in that room, I authorized the building of a 6 million test track. And we got the solution in March. By May, we were launching roller coasters at 54 seconds to 60 miles an hour, and we had to get down to 48 seconds to match Disney's requirements, and the rest is history. There's 2 roller coasters, one in Orlando, one in Paris, with the name of Rock and Roller Coaster. So I have a passion for technology, but not for technology's sake. I love working at the intersection of technology and the pure creativity. So with creative people coming up with an experience that is going to entertain and delight people. So that's where I start from. Now, where is the... Is there a clicker somewhere to move on the slides? If not, I'll do it on. Okay, so the business we set up in 2010, why did we set it up in 2010? I did 2 projects in 2008 in Vienna, Austria. We needed a motion system. I bought the motion system from a company. I was disappointed at the performance. The service was terrible. And I went home after a very intense meeting with the company, totally frustrated. Woke up in the morning, the light bulb went on and said, damn it, we'll do it ourselves. So I phoned my mechanical engineer. I said, we want to put together a team. I need a controls guy. Nobody from the entertainment industry, nobody from the simulation industry. Not really quite sure what I want, but I'll know it when I see it. 6 weeks later, he phoned me and said, there's a guy who comes out of the robotics industry, you need to meet with him. And he has been absolutely core. We call him our Welsh wizard, almost a genius. Left school at 15 as well. And by the age of 26, he was Sony Robotics Technical Director in the UK, and he was running development teams in Japan at 26 years old, flying out every 6 weeks. And he's now part of our team. He's also a shareholder in our manufacturing company because we want a long-term relationship with him. So we do multimedia, multi-sensory, motion-based attractions. We put people in an environment that they want to believe it's absolutely real. Our products include flying theaters where in the moment people really believe they're flying. I could go into more detail. If anybody wants to know any more, they can ask me afterwards because it takes too long to go through that. In 1998, when I was building Rock and Roller Coaster for Disney, Disney took me behind the scenes on a ride called the Tower of Terror. If anybody of you have been to Disney Orlando, you may have ridden it. Basically, they pull you down faster than gravity. You come down at about 1.1 G. No one else has ever done that because it's too expensive. I came away from that meeting in 1998 and said, one day I will have a solution, a better solution. I know I will. Roll forward to 3.5 years ago. I was approached at a trade show by a guy I'd worked with nearly 20 years before. And he said, I need to do this. And I need a solution because the solution that Disney's got, it's not affordable. It's funny how things start the creative juices going. Because I hadn't really thought about the problem for several years. And that night, I said, I know the solution to this. What we will do is drop the elevator under gravity. We get about 0.9 of a G because I must keep tension on the cable. And then we will take one of our motion systems, which is special, we'll drop that at the same time. You can add the 2 acceleration vectors together, and the guests will feel 1.1 G. Not only that, instead of like Disney, you drop horizontally, we can now drop at different angles and really scare people. So what we've done requires a significant amount of investment and time, both funding and money. We're extremely lucky. We did have a contract for our first system with a company in America. The contract was under New York law because they insisted. They had a CEO who was a visionary, who was prepared to go with us and wanted our solution. The problem was they were in Chapter 11. When they came out of Chapter 11, literally at the 11th hour and the 59th minute, a second group came in with a better offer. He was booted out within 10 days. The guy who came in was totally and utterly conservative. First of all, put the project on hold, then told me he didn't want 1, he wanted 2, and we started work on it. 3 months later, he cancelled the whole project. The roller coaster ride was unbelievable during that time. But we got the contract out, and the contract said, if the contract it was not that, if there was a termination of the contract, it had to be for cause. We had to be in default of the contract. There was no other reason for cancelling the contract. So I spoke to my lawyers in Orlando. They said, go to New York. This is the company you need to meet because it's New York law. We met with them. Because they cancelled the contract for their convenience, they had to pay us 100%. They could take the equipment or leave the equipment with us. In the end, we negotiated 85% on the dollar. That funded our development. It lost us the marketing opportunity, which was extremely painful, but it gave us the opportunity to actually have 2 to 3 years to develop the technology in the way that we needed to. So starting up in funding, you've got to have some luck sometimes, and that's what we had. It's a high technology company. Our control systems are incredibly complex, incredibly advanced. Our data update rate, which is the rate at which you update the data for the motion system, the typical industry average is 35 milliseconds. Our coarse update rate is 2 milliseconds, and our fine update rate, which is an interpolation routine which is used in the robotics industry, is 125 microseconds. That allows us to have the smoothest motion in the industry, and we can overlay it with vibrations up to 100 hertz, so we can do some really neat stuff. We're in a competitive market, and it's a mature market. This is just a cross-section of the flying theatre. It's a motion system on 3 axes. People stand. If you want to know why people stand, thank you, Matthew, then I'll explain at another time. Not enough time, but you can see people are having great fun, and it's designed for 5 years old to 70 plus, and we've had people over 75 years old ride it, and I had a lot of fun. You don't need aggressive motion. The motion is there to enhance the experience, not to be the experience. This is the latest one. This is a tower ride, the one I imagined. We have a passenger unit. In fact, we have 2. We have a method with a cassette to load on the passenger unit so that when you're loading and unloading, you don't waste time in the tower, but I haven't got time to go into that. Passenger unit for 40 people, a motion system, and then the platform. The whole thing weighs 38 tons. We drop that at 0.9 of a G for 11 meters, and then we slam you into brakes, eddy current brakes, magnetic brakes, with a 3G deceleration. We use the same brakes in the horizontal mode on the rock and roller coaster for stopping the sled. It was like an aircraft carrier catapult launch system, and we stopped the sled from 60 miles an hour in 20 meters. So that's what we do. And we have the screen on that is 30 meters high. It'll be the largest screen in the world. And the projector is actually on the motion system, so the environment moves with you throughout the experience. So we're in the capital markets, typically 3 million to 30 million. So getting people's attention is not particularly easy, and you have to get into their capital planning cycle. So it takes time. Typically, the planning cycles for theme parks can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years. So this is not something you can walk in and pick up an order the next day. We have direct competition. There are other people doing flying theatres, but not like ours. There's indirect competition. It may be that year they decide to put in a restaurant, they maybe decide to put in a roller coaster or something else. So we're not dealing just with pure direct competition. Cash flow can be a major issue, as it was last year. I'll come to that in a little bit. One of the things in selling these and in marketing them is making the technology sound very simple, and that's quite a challenge, but one that I enjoy. Defining and understand each customer's decision-making process. We have certain customers where you're talking to the owner of the business, and he's the decision maker. Makes it very easy. Others are very convoluted and almost government-like in their approach to decision-making. Matthew very kindly gave me a book called Crossing the Chasm by Moore, which I found absolutely fascinating, because in the life of our company, we've just got to the position where we are literally crossing the chasm from a young startup company to a mature company, and we have to mature very, very quickly while staying entrepreneurial. I won't go through that in detail because I'm going to run out of time. You can read the book by G. Moore if you want. But we are literally going through that, just about to enter that red zone at the moment. And let me jump on. We're in a global market. We're a small company, but our market's fully international. Our major markets at the moment are China and America. and I'm spending far too much time on aeroplanes at the moment. In fact, my wife, when she's asked where I live, she said mainly on aeroplanes. There's language, there's business practice, there's commissions, and there's some ethical issues as well. And you have to look very carefully whether you decide to do things or not. In fact, we had a situation in China where we were extremely nervous of what was going on, and we were asked to buy certain gifts for people. We had a dinner with this group of people. We've never heard from them again. And I know now the signs that I have to look for when that type of thing starts happening. It's less and less in China. It used to be very prevalent. Leveraging the core team. The tower ride that I mentioned, how on earth do we do that as a small company? Because I don't want to have big overheads. We're in a project-related business. If I have big overheads, if we don't get projects, we've got to lay a lot of people off. So it's basically team working. On the tower ride, I have 4 groups of engineers. I have a French company. He was the engineer who did the alternate to the launch system for Rock and Roller Coaster. I've been working with him for 20 years. His latest project is the Singapore Stadium, where the roofs are movable and the whole stadium is reconfigurable to three configurations. We're working with a Welsh company with a Welsh wizard. We're working with a company out of Florida. They're called Celtic Engineering. They're led by another Welshman. And we're also working with a company out of Las Vegas. Why Las Vegas? Because in that tower ride, one of the complicated parts of it is integrated into the building. And the company that we've chosen out of Las Vegas has got 20 years of experience in putting complex ride systems into casinos, hotels, in various cities in the US. So leveraging the core team is really important. Managing that core team is also important. And what's truly amazing, the unexpected benefits you get out of that, is when one team has an idea about something that someone else is working on, and you get this international approach, which gives you a very, very rich approach to problem solving and technology development. Keeping the overheads low, I've mentioned. Business partner compatibility. I've been involved in startups before. I worked with an incredibly talented designer. He was impossible to work with. So finding where you get the chemistry between the partners, because to run an organization like this as a startup is too much for a single person. My business partner is Austrian. He's a barrister in Vienna. That's his background. And he does all the administration and the finance for the company. Setting priorities, another absolutely crucial thing as we go through which projects are we going to take, which ones are we not going to take, which customers are we going to tell if they do want to work with us, they're going to have to wait a year. Beating the competition. The approach that we've taken is to make the equipment as reliable as possible. Our mean time between failure on our motors and our gearboxes by the manufacturers that we use is over 40 years. I want to put them in and never have to touch them again. Our competition doesn't come anywhere near that. We have the lowest volume of building. We have the lowest power by a factor of 10. We have the lowest footprint foundation loads by a factor of 6. So these things really help us in our competitive advantage. I've mentioned about the visionary CEO who's replaced with a pragmatist. We then got a second project which was in China. Everything went fantastically well for the first year, and then we were stopped being paid. The CEO ran out, he completely lost focus on what he was doing. He fell out of favor with the landlord where the project was going, but you never know what's going to happen. And at a trade show in China last month, the landlord of the building came to us and said, could we resurrect the project and do it directly for him? And we now have to look at the legality of how we do that, whether it's feasible or not, because of the potential lawsuits between the two people. We're doing a flying theatre in the first museum. So it'll be the first flying theatre ever in a museum. It's in a new museum that's going to open in Washington next year. And this is a visionary CEO who has transitioned himself with a pragmatic team into develop this museum. Actually, he ran theme parks, and he was hired by the owner of the museum to develop the museum because he wanted to bring out the educational and entertainment value. I could tell you more about that, but I don't have time in this presentation. It's a fascinating project. We're doing a crazy flight over Washington, D.C., linked to the Bible. How do you do that? You have to ask me and I'd tell you, but we've done it. The fourth client, and this is the tower ride, the first tower ride. In November last year, we were at a trade show, the last day, which is normally dead flat. A guy who I'd presented to in another company 2 years before remembered that we were looking at this technology and we were going to bring it to market, but I didn't give him a time scale. He came to me about an hour before the show closed and said, "Can you still do that?" And the answer is yes, we can, but we need the client because there's about in cost, there's 5 million euros development in this project. So without a client, there's no way that we could afford to do it. So he went back and sold it to the company that's designing the park and to the owner of the park. This will be going into China. I had dinner with the deputy who reports to the owner who's responsible for the project, and I was talking to him about how difficult it is to get people to buy into technologies when they're new. They all say to you, "I want to be the first, but where can I ride one?" You can't. You can come to our research facility and you can ride one there, but you can't ride one in the market. Well, I'm not quite sure. And this is classic of the people that you deal with and you cross the chasm where they absolutely want validation that this is going to work. So I said to him, why are you doing this? Because we absolutely want to be the first in the market. That was it. And that was wonderful music to my ears. And we're working with a great team with our client on that project. Also, I was working through a Japanese design team with a project that went sour in China. They've come back to me with 2 more projects. And by the way, it's not 2 more projects, it's 2 more projects per year for the next 5 years. We found the company in 2010. 2011-13, we developed the motion system and patent filings. Our first project, which I've, outside of the core business, actually developed some cash flow for us. We had the failed project, which I haven't put up there because of the New York issue. The second project with patent filings, which is the Flying Theatre. Where we are today is, I'm just going to jump over to the last slide. We started in 2012. We self-funded into them with orders of 80,000, 0.9 million in 13, 4.8 million in 2014. We had the cancel order in China, which blew our 2015 budget, but we have orders that we'll be signing in the next 4 weeks for close to 35 million. So we have a massive challenge ahead of us in transitioning from this small entrepreneurial company to a mainstream company. That's where we are. Thank you very much for your interest.